Coogs House. The Houston Cougars host the Kansas Jayhawks this weekend in a rematch of a game that Houston lost the first time around. But if they can win this Saturday, they get sole possession of the Big 12. Why is this Saturday going to be so different?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, please be sure to subscribe. Down below, then we lay on Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. And if you found us on YouTube, welcome back. It is so good to see you again. Remember to hit subscribe, like, and comment on videos to let us know you're in the contest. Doing a giveaway at 2,500. We're getting close to 2,075. Hit like and comment and subscribe. Help us do all the things there. If you don't know what to say after talking about Houston and Kansas basketball this whole time, tell us. If you like, we'll do chips and queso or nachos. All right. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Kansas game this weekend. It's interesting when you talk about a breakdown like this because, honestly, a lot of the matchups and things like that are fairly similar to the first time around. So we don't need to go into ins out to who's probably going to cover who and this, that, and the other thing, right? We're going to talk about in the first segment is what's going to be different in favor of Houston in this matchup. I feel firmly that Houston can win this matchup this weekend and lead into a Big 12 title outright in the regular season. The second segment, we'll talk about a big man's going to have a big part in that. Actually, kind of a pair, but definitely one big man's going to have a big part in that. And then the last segment, I got to admit, I have some lingering fears. But let's jump on into our episode that is brought to you today by LinkedIn Jobs. Make sure you check out LinkedIn Jobs /Locked On College for more. All right. What will be different in this basketball game? Well, first, what's different is Kansas is on the road. And I don't mean to say that like flippantly or anything. I mean, they're still a good team. They're ranked 14th in the country. They opened the season ranked number 1 in the country, spent all but this past week, as the a top 10 team in the country. But bluntly, they aren't any good on the road. They played just one true road game in their non-conference at Indiana. They did win, to be fair. They played a handful of their neutral games, but in true road games this season, they are 3-6, 2-6 in Big 12 road games, true road games. That is, their 2 wins in the Big 12 are Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. So something about the Sooner State's really nice to Kansas. Outside of that, they have losses at BYU, at Tech, at Kansas State in overtime, at Central Florida, at Baylor. I'm mentioning teams who obviously are paying attention that Houston won. You also have at Iowa State. That was tough for Houston to play at, right? I see this as a team that has a lot of struggles on the road. Home environment clearly gets them up. Home gym helps a lot. I also think that's something to be said about the way that home environment impacts their opponent, right? They need that bump in a way that they don't get on the road. Now, Kansas was good neutral floor type stuff too. They beat Kentucky on a neutral floor. They beat Tennessee on a neutral floor. And they beat Chaminade on, they call it a semi-away. It's not really an away game, but I say that to say that I get how you could tell me that, well, but they're still a good team. Look at the team they beat that weren't a home court deal or whatever. I just look at their Big 12 schedule as of late. I would also point out that they've lost 2 of the last 3 games. The game they won handily. They beat Kansas State by 22, 90-68 on Tuesday. But that was home game, last home game of the season, senior night, etc. Rivalry game on top of that. A lot of factors in play, especially when we talk about their home court advantage. Previous 2 games, they lost to BYU at home and Baylor in Waco. Now, other thing I think will be different is Jamal Shead will shoulder a lot more of the scoring in this one. In the first matchup, he had 7 points. It was his worst scoring output in Big 12 play. 22% from the floor in that game, including 0 of 3 from deep. That was his worst shooting day by percentage on the season. Second worst shooting, I'm sorry. Only got to the rim 3 times. You look at a shot chart, only 3 shots were inside of 10 feet. That's very not Jamal Shead. What I would anticipate in this one is a lot more of getting him to the rim. We noticed in moments against Central Florida this week, against Baylor, when it's time to get things going, they get him downhill. I imagine you'll see a lot more of that in this matchup for sure. Didn't happen as much in the first time. LJ Cryer will continue to play well in this matchup, so that's not going to necessarily be different, but I think it's a reason that I feel like this game will be different. Cryer had 24 points in the first matchup. He's playing lights out the last couple of games. For what it's worth, he shoots a very similar percentage at home. It's a little wonk. It's like within 2 percentage points, actually technically a little worse, but they played so many more home games with the sample size being a lot larger, right? So take that with a grain of salt that it deserves. The biggest factor here, though, is Javier Francis will be healthy. Now, Javier, remember, played the first 4 minutes of the game in the first matchup and fell on his hip. Not a dirty play necessarily. I hate to assume intent, and I don't try and do that with the worst of intentions. I do assume okay, that should be a foul this Sunday, whatever. Right? Blah, blah, blah. But Francis went down early. He fell on his hip, came out of the game, and everyone back in against Kansas the first time. That's most notable because then Houston was playing freshman JoJo Tugler in that matchup for 34 minutes. Tugler played 34 minutes in Fog Allen as the youngest player in the Big 12. And frankly, I'd argue played all right, had struggles covering Hunter Dickinson, but played all right on the whole. They eventually switched J1 over and things evened up a little bit. I say that to say that I think with Javier healthy, that's a true rim protector. You can find different matchups to where he will actually be at the rim. You can match him up on KJ Adams, a non-shooting threat at power forward, and that'll put Javier down by the rim because that's where Adams scores from, right? As long as he maintains verticality when Adams leaps at the basket, I think he'll be okay. Now, I love KJ. If you listen to the show for a long time, you understand that and know why. And rest in peace to Yvonne, Coach Adams. But I really, really think that that's a great matchup for Javier. That puts J1 out on Hunter Dickinson on the perimeter. They had to put J1 on Hunter Dickinson, and that messed things up for their defense a little bit. If they put him on Dickinson because Dickinson tries to go to the post, I imagine Javier is much, frankly, more experienced down there. I know he's not that much more. He hadn't played that many more games than JoJo, but he's been in the system. He's worked with Kellen, Coach Kellen, and he's done these things for a long time in our system and understands what we do. So even though he doesn't have a whole lot more games under his belt because of who he's been playing behind last year and stuff like that, I do think it's worth mentioning that he's got that many more reps with what Houston's doing schematically in our system. All that together, I really do think this game does flip. I do think that Houston wins. I'll get more into my prediction when I get to my fears in the last segment. But I do think that on top of it being Houston's senior day for a tremendous senior class, guys had COVID years. You want to come back. I'm not pushing anyone out the door. But this year's senior class is as stupendous as you can imagine. Also worth pointing out, the Big 12 championship is literally on the line. Houston has a share of it locked up. They can get the whole thing with a win or an Iowa State loss on Saturday. Iowa State probably doesn't lose. I'd imagine this comes down to Houston beating Kansas. I think it happens. I think they get the thing done, but it isn't going to be easy. I think it's going to come down to forward play. I think our guards will keep up with their guards. Cryer, a better day out of Shed, Sharp, etc. Big men and depth rotation is going to be challenging. And that gets me into the second segment. But first, I got to tell you about our newest buddies because this is one I'm really excited about, actually. Fire TV is your destination as a sports fan. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. You'll notice sometimes the light changes here on my side because I've got TV going basketball from Fire TV all the time right next to me. The Fire TV stick is something you can also plug into your existing TV that provides the exact same access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. With this opening weekend for baseball, college basketball tournament, anything you got going on, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Now, Fire TV was a recently created Fire TV channel to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And yes, that includes us. That includes us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more. Keep up to date on all the latest worlds of sports, March Madness, the NBA, MLB's coming up soon, the Astros, and all that, and more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking, all the good stuff outside of sports that you're into as well, because you're a well-rounded person. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Learn more at Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right. I mentioned in several different ways that Kansas plays Hunter Dickinson. It's one of the reasons they're the number one team in the country to start the season was the transfer of Hunter Dickinson in from Michigan. Kansas plays gigantic. KJ Adams is listed at 6'7", 235, 240, depending on what website you're at. He might be 6'8", but he plays bully ball at the rim, uses his strength. I've mentioned several times before, having known the family fairly well. It comes from a crazy athletic family. Lots of big, strong, explosive athletes in that family. He is one of them. Johnny Furphy, their small forward, the smaller guy, is listed at 6'9", 200. I bet he's actually closer to 6'10". He looks long and lanky. That might just be standing next to KJ. Might just be standing next to our guys. He's a long and lanky small forward from down under. And then Hunter Dickinson's at 7'2". He plays big man down low, but also brings ball up to the perimeter and can pass and shoot pretty well out there for a true center. That is to say, Houston's going to have two true bigs on the floor at all times. One of them's going to have to mark Dickinson wherever he is on the floor. One is going to keep up with KJ Adams at the rim because, frankly, they'd love to have a third if they had one on the roster, right? Because of the kind of size Kansas plays with. And that leads me to, I think Sid Lott has to play this game. And I understand inexperience. I understand being young. I understand, frankly, he only started playing basketball a few years ago, right? In the first Kansas matchup, after the Francis injury, Tugler played 34 minutes. Again, the youngest guy in the conference played 34 minutes at Fog Allen. That demonstrates clearly with his 34 minutes and the 4 minutes that Javier Francis was able to play. And then you also add that Jawan Roberts played his own 38 minutes. They pretty much went the entire 40 minutes with two bigs on the floor. Now, Francis and Roberts are the two starters. I'm not saying we need to mix up the starting lineup. They're number one team in the country. That's not what you do at this point in the year. But is it realistic that Javier Francis doesn't need a blow? Is it realistic that he stays completely clean and foul trouble in the entire game? Is it completely realistic that he doesn't break a shoelace or he doesn't roll an ankle again and he come out for a couple minutes? Are any of those, knock on wood, right? Any injury, knock on wood. All those things you have to assume as a game planning coach can and will happen. Okay. So that means, do you go to a small lineup against these guys and try and shoot them out of it with Dunn or Wilson? Or do you pull in Sid Lott? I think you've got to pull in Sid Lott. And I think, frankly, you pull in Sid Lott for Javier or Jawan. Jawan has the knee they're draining every 2 weeks. He has the stitches in his hand. He also plays like every minute of every game. I'm sure his body's wearing down in other ways we hadn't even heard of, right? And if you can keep him fresh for those clutch minutes at the end of the game, you got to do that too. Another one where I think you could play Sid Lott and either put Lott down close to the rim, maybe run sort of a 3-2 zone. They've done that a little bit this year and last year with he and Francis down low in it. Lott needs to play. And I think what's interesting about this matchup, and I thought the same thing about UCF, but they went with one big for a lot of that game, is they're going to have to play two posts. And there's a couple different matchups that actually, even within Kansas starters, I think play into Lott's favor. I love KJ. Y'all have heard me talk about that. I think I've mentioned twice today already. So I'm sorry to belabor that. It's cool to see a kid grow up and do the thing the right way. I will say I wish he's a very Houston Cougar type player. I wish he'd come to Houston, but that's not here nor there. I do say I look at Lott and the KJ Adams matchup, though, as one that favors Sid. KJ doesn't shoot the jump shot very well, and he takes a long time to get off. He shoots from his midsection, like down near his belly button, right? Lott can sag off of him and be more of a rim protector. There's no defense 3 seconds in college basketball. He can be way far off him, still be a rim protector, and when it looks like KJ's going to shoot, he can close out of the jump shot. That's a good match for him because it doesn't pull a lot away from the basket in spots where he's probably a little bit less comfortable because he hasn't played as much basketball as the guys on the roster, right? I say that really quickly because I think it's important to get through all of this, but I want to stress, I think said Lott can stick the KJ Adams matchup because he can turn KJ Adams into a shooter. And honestly, if KJ were to, beat Houston shooting 80% on mid-range pull-ups, I don't know what you do at that point, right? That just doesn't seem like a likely outcome. That's one way I think that Lott matches up with Kansas. The other is where KJ is much more, explosive and quick, fast twitch way for sure, and presents a challenge that way. So Lott's going to sag off him, make him shoot jumpers. When it comes to Hunter Dickinson, the better athlete is said. I don't know if y'all paid attention, but he is a gigantic ballerina the way his footwork works. And Hunter Dickinson, for all of his talent, is not that fleet of foot relative to the other guys that are going to be on the court this Saturday, right? And so you see Dickinson, and I think the opposite ends up happening where Lott goes out and covers him at the perimeter because he's got the size to bang with him and not get beat down low, but is quick enough to where, from an athleticism standpoint, he's not going to be beat off the bounce by Hunter Dickinson, right? Now, will the experience of Hunter Dickinson come to play? Sure. He's an All-American. Will he score? I'm sure he'll score, right? But as far as like being able to physically beat Dickinson to a spot and cut him off, Said can do that. And Said is able to do it while also being big enough that he's not going to get bully ball back down on the block, right? Not by Hunter Dickinson for sure, right? And so I think it would turn Dickinson into a passer. He's a good passer. Don't get me wrong. That's a tool in his arsenal. But then you know what you're dealing with if you can turn him into a passer, right? I think both of those matchups are things that Said Lott would be able to do, right? Is he my preferred choice? No, I want Francis and Roberts to play 40 minutes with both stamina and injuries turned off on the video games. That way everything's groovy. But in a more realistic sense, I feel like you're going to have to trot out someone. And I think instead of trying to go small and changing up what you do, because the way that Dickinson shoots threes, I actually think that doesn't work very well against them. I do think what you end up doing is you go with Lott as your second big when it's time to do that. Now, can Lott help out with someone with Parker Braun, or they also play Kevin McCullough sometimes in more of a small forward spot and bump Furphy to a power forward? And can different matchups negotiate different things? Maybe. But in the traditional starting lineup, I actually see spots I think Said helps us out if he needs to. And I would implore them to do it. You go to the Big 12 Conference Tournament, you're going to need fresh legs with a couple days if you want to win that thing. If you're ready to kind of punt on it and get ready for March Madness, you still got to play 2 games in 3 days, no matter what rounds you're looking at. And I think you're going to need the legs there too. I think getting Said ready, especially because he's not like you're not tearing a red shirt to do it. I think it's something that they've got to look into doing this weekend. And frankly, I think it's a great matchup to do. I think it's weird that the stars aligned like that for Said. I think that's a good thing. Now, obviously, they're going to prove me wrong and go small and just think that, they'll put Wilson out there on Adams, or they'll put Dunn out there on Dickinson. And I'm going to look like a fool. But I think there's ways to manipulate this with the size that we've got, even if Lott hasn't played a whole lot this year. No pun intended there. That was not on purpose. I mentioned that I do have some looming concerns in this one. I'm going to predict Houston win in a second, but I do have looming concerns over this game. But one thing I don't have to have any concern about is finding a way to hire folks at my small business to put together a great team like our Houston Cougars. Because when you're hiring for your small business, you've got to find quality professionals that are right for the role you're looking for. And that's where you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It's a place to go. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire, gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy. We have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked-on-college. That's linkedin.com/locked-on-college. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so I mentioned I've got some looming concerns. I do think Houston wins the game. And I say that to preface this segment because this segment might sound doom and gloom. For what it's worth, they could lose the game by 50, 11 points, and they still have to share the Big 12 title. Eat it, Kansas. But in terms of this game and things that worry me, I don't want to ever be 50, 11 points at Fertitta, but the most obvious, the depth. The last time Houston played, when Francis went down, Tugler came in and was impactful. Tugler played a solid 34 minutes. For what it's worth, Ramon Walker also played for fairly important at the time minutes. Neither one of them is available in this game, obviously, with season-ending injuries. Houston going in the last few games really just 7 deep. Lott played a little bit of first half minutes against Central Florida. That's a concern. It's a concern because Kansas, as a program with the history and the tools and the whatever, will pull guys like a Parker Braun off the bench. They'll pull guys like a Nicholas Timberlake off the bench, a Marco Jackson, right? Guys that are high-ranked high school kids. Even a Marco Jackson, he's going to get a whole lot of clock. He's a freshman playing behind DeJuan Harris, but he was one of the best high school players in America, right? Like those kinds of guys are on their roster, whereas Houston's depth is like it goes to Lott and then Elvin, and I understand that there are things that those guys both do well, but asking like Ryan Elvin to play long minutes and stretches of defense against top caliber talent is not something we've seen them do before, and they can see him play every day. So it indicates to me that like there's a reason for that, right? Depth and rotations will be challenging. Foul trouble could lead to some, not so great things in that. You could also see, breaking a shoelace, fall on the ground, twist an ankle, and you'll get it taped up, right? Those kinds of things will hurt you, and the depth and rotation worries me some. The matchup that worries me is not Hunter Dickinson, the All-American. It's not DeJuan Harris, who admittedly had a pretty solid game in the first outing. I guess I should say that, like, Dickinson had 20 points, so maybe I shouldn't look past that one so much. Kevin McCullers had his 17. I shouldn't look past that one so much, et cetera, et cetera. But the kid that worries me the most is the freshman from Down Under and Furphy, right? This Johnny Furphy guy is going to be a half a foot taller than basically everyone Houston's going to put on him. They're going to start with Manuel Sharp. I'll get into why it's a good idea later. But Sharp has given up a solid 6 inches, depending on what listing you're looking at, 5 on some. Furphy's also long and lanky. He had 17 points in the first matchup, went 3 of 4 from 3, 6 of 7 from the field. And frankly, it was kind of like this, at a national, people started realizing who this guy was. Now, he has had double figures in 5 of the 8 games since, but 17 is the highest he's had since the Houston game last. I'm not saying Emmanuel can't do it. What Emmanuel brings to the matchup is a physicality and a toughness, and frankly, a weightiness to playing that spot in front of him and keeping him away from the rim in half-court settings, right? But I do wonder, is the length of Malik Wilson, now that he's playing more minutes, is that something that's important to this matchup for Houston? Damian Dunn's got some size to him relative to other guards, and Furphy will always get a guard. I say Furphy will always get a guard because when you look at the lineups that Kansas rolls out there, KJ Adams plays a lot of minutes at the power forward spot down around the rim on offense. He plays per KenPom 68% of the minutes Adams does, okay? Then you have Hunter Dickinson, who per Ken Palm plays 84% of their minutes. Johnny Furphy plays 74% of their minutes. You're looking for roughly 7 out of every 10 minutes. All 3 of those guys are on the floor, right? That's a lot. That's a lot. And that means that as Furphy is the perimeter guy, he's going to get a guard. And Houston's guards are not 6'9". Most guards in America are not. They have other things that they're really good at. And like I said, I think Emmanuel's toughness and physicality, especially in Fertitta, with the crowd being a factor as well, will obviously be a good thing for them. But I just worry that Furphy can shoot over the top of stuff. And I worry that they can put him on the block and do some stuff down low with him. He's a tough matchup, and he's really, really good. He had 17 on us last time. I would go to Wilson next if Sharp is struggling. That would be my initial thought, is maybe just put a great athlete on and make him drive him nuts, right? Drive him nuts, make him, drive him crazy. Because when he's hitting outside jump shots, the driving lanes for their other guys widen out a lot, because you got to play KJ Adams for the lob. You got to play Dickinson out behind the three-point line. That opens up a lot of driving lanes. So if you have to come off of him, you got to have a great athlete to do it. That's why if Sharp's having trouble, I'd go to Malik. But whichever the case, I think Sharp being more physical might be the way to go, and that's why I think that'll be an interesting way to start the game. Just so that you're going to allow him to play physical and all of that. I think that matchup is scary from an individual perspective. Now, I take Jamal over Dwan Harris. I think on the point total at the end of the game, LJ will have more than McCullough. McCullough is coming back from it. He played full game since, but did have an injury between last Houston game and this one. So, I'm not saying do like people do to Jay, want to tap his hand every time or tap his ankle every time or whatever. But I do think it's worth noting that McCullough is coming back from an injury. In this game, I got, in my mind, Houston winning by like 8 or 9 points. I'm going to say 70-62. 70-62 Cougs. A fun game, probably closer to 4 or 5, and then some free throws at the end. I do think that the X factor becomes Emmanuel Sharp. I think Cryer gets a roll, and I think Shead scores 6 points. But Sharp getting his 15 or so kind of puts them over the top. I hope to see some Sedlot minutes. And I think that when you see Sedlot, you'll see various defensive coverages. But when it's their first group out there, what I think you really see is a lot of just tough, physical, not a whole lot of help side, a whole lot of tough, physical, true, traditional man defense. 50 defense, what we would call it, 5 men, no switching. Because you got to stick with the matchups, maybe between guards, but not between anyone else. Kansas offers very different athletes, and you're just going to give them heck for a long, long time in this one. Make it ugly, but are kind of ugly. And I think Houston again comes out on top. Goes 70-62 with the prediction. Big 12 champs in year one. That's what the title of Saturday night, Sunday for Monday, whatever it will be as we get ready for Big 12 Conference tournament play. Exciting time to be a Houston Cougar in terms of men's basketball at the very least, if not all the other stuff with the Big 12 and the move and so on, and Fritz Smith and all that. It's March Madness. We are officially in March. There's a lot going on with the Houston Cougars. So make sure you subscribe and follow us each and every day here along this journey. Appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. For a second listen, go check out Locked On College Basketball. They're breaking down everything and all things March as well. We do need to spend some of March talking about spring football practices and the Fritzmas and the transfer portals and seedings and all kinds of absolute chaos. So more here each and every day. Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Houston Cougars, are number 1 in America and the Big 12 Houston Cougars every day. Go Cougs.